Hello, my name is Moxham, and this is the very first tutorial in the BGE Essentials series. And in this one we're going to be going over settings. Now settings is essential because it really broadens the audience of your game. To let people change the game according to their own computer is, well, essential. So if they have a bigger screen than maybe you have when you export the game, or if they want to play into full screen or windowed, you've got to be able to let the player change it to how they want it. So that's what we're going to be going over. This is going to be in two parts. Our first part is going to be teaching the game engine to read a settings file, which can be found on a hard drive, so that they can change it in case the game's been put into a setting which makes it inaccessible. And then it's going to load in from this external file into the game, and it's going to memorize it so that you can change it later, which is going to be our second part, which is going to be changing the settings whilst in the game and updating it all while it's in the game. So I'll just show you the example, what I'm working from. So this is my game here, Vsync, and as you can see, last time I played was obviously windowed in 800 by 600, and what just happened then, which you guys didn't behind the scenes of the game, is it just read from the file and went, oh, this is set to 800 by 600 in windowed mode, so let's do that. And as you can see here, my resolution is set to 64 by 64. So cool. So in our settings, we can change the settings in the menu. Let's just buff up the resolution. Oops, sorry, I went past the one I wanted. Like that, and it's windowed. Cool, so I'll go into the actual game itself to give you the example. That loading time, fabulous. Now of course, I'm only going to be showing you a limited number of settings that you can change in this tutorial. Of course you can add more, like filters. For example, I use the same principle to load and unload filters, like so that when you start the game, it always starts with that. And if I go into settings, a few cool things that I added for myself are things like frame rate, profile, and debug. I can turn them on and off during gameplay, because a testing session takes about half an hour these days just to get to where I want to test with the artificial intelligence in the game. So it's good just to be able to turn this off and be able to read my GUI properly and everything up in the top screen, be able to see that, and turn it off when I need to. And of course we've got motion blur, which we can turn off, as you can see, and we've got Vsync, which you can turn off, on, and adaptive, full screen on and off, which works like that. And if we exit to desktop and start the standalone player again, it remembers our settings and loads in accordingly. So let's get started. Sorry, I'm just going to cough for a second. My apologies. So let's open Blender. This is our new file, and what we're going to do is we're not going to delete the cube. We're going to be groundbreaking here, and we're going to move it into the second layer because we're going to use it later. No spoilers yet. Cool, and I'm just going to change this to logic editor, split my main window into text and 3D, and I'm gonna, ooh, sorry, pushed a button, ooh. And I'm going to add an empty, which is a sphere. Somehow I moved the cursor by accident. I'm just going to change its size to 10, and I'm going to rename it main controller. And this is going to sit in my game, the entire game. It's going to have everything essential stuck into it. So I'm just going to open up the states here into number 1, and I'm going to add an always sensor into state 1 with a Python script. And this Python script is going to be called init.py. Ooh, that's pu, py. There we go. And now if we go into state 2 and create a new script, this is going to be called menu.py. Now this should be very similar to how you do it in your game. You have everything load in before the game actually starts. load in your assets, load in your settings, for example, load in all the whatever you need, all the scripts, all the text buttons and things. So we're going to add menu.py and true level triggering on for both. Cool. And if we go to init.py, we're going to go import BGE. Oh, I'm jumping the gun here. We haven't even made a settings file yet, nor have we saved the Blender file. So as you can see, I've got an example there which I made earlier. So settings.blend. And let's actually make our settings. So let's open up LibreOffice. I'm just going to zoom in. And let's create our settings. So this is our header. And we're going to go Option, Settings. Nope, just setting. We don't need the S there. And we're going to have two columns. These are going to be the options, which we're going to allow our player to change or user to change. And these are going to be the settings that those options are set to. So our very first setting is going to be window width. Following that is going to be window height and full screen. This means that we can let people change the width and height of the screen and change from window to full screen mode. Very simple. Next one is Vsync. And then we're going to have Anisotropic Filtering. Anisotropic Filtering. And then we're going to have motion blur, similar to the game, and frame rate, profile, and debug. Cool. So let me just double check that I've got that all right. Awesome. And we're going to set our settings for them. So I'm going to set it to my screen resolution on my screen, which is 1920 by 1080. Oops, sorry. 1080. And our full screen is going to be a boolean, so it's going to be 0 or 1. 0 for false, 1 for true. And we're going to go 1 for true. Vsync is an integer because it can be either false, true, or adaptive. We'll set it to true. Anisotropic filtering is an integer because it can be 2, 4, 8, 16, or 0, of course. We'll set it to 16. Motion blur we'll set to 1 because it's true or false, and frame rate is profile and debug are all true or false, and we'll set them to false for now. Cool. And that's that done. We're going to go save as, and we're going to save it as a CSV file, and we're going to go setting. As you can see, I've got an example there as well already made. And that's that. Save. So now if we open up the folder, we're going to add our delimiter, which is a semicolon. So now if we open up our folder with the settings file in it, make sure that they're in the same folder. We can see that it's made a text file with our settings in here. I'm just going to add a space gap between all of them, like that, and go save. Sorry, I have it opened in there still. Cool. Now that we have our settings file with settings that it can read from, we can actually get into writing the script that will load it into the game. So, import BGE and CSV module, and then from BGE import logic. And then we're going to do all our standard naming, assigning, whatever you want to do. So controller equals logic get current controller, own equals con.owner, scene equals logic get current scene. I'll just zoom in slightly. I added a minus there, but other than that my spelling is fine for once. And then we're going to load in the global dictionary. And now what we're going to do is when we read the settings from the CSV file, we're actually going to drop them into the GD so that the settings can be accessed from anywhere within the game, and then from that GD we're going to apply it. That's the process, and that's the process in which the tutorial is going to run. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to create a new module, and we're going to call it settings import. and in this we're going to have our file and our type. And so first thing we're going to do is we've got to read the file. So we're going to define the file that it's going to read. So open, and we're just going to go logic.expand path, and what this is going to do is it's going to tell it to read a directory relative to the blend file where we saved the blend file, and we're going to add another backslash and then go plus file and then comma, and we're going to set in apostrophes, put an R, and that stands for read, because that's what we're doing right now. We're reading the settings file. Okay, and now we're going to tell our CSV module up here to read from this file. So we're going to call that, so everything's been added to a database, so we're going to call it db, which is short for database, csv.reader, and we're going to tell it to read our file, which we've just defined the path for, and we're going to assign its delimiter to be a semicolon, which is the delimiter that we set in the file. As you can see here, everything between the two columns has this semicolon between it, like that. Okay. Now, so what we're going to do now, just thinking, give me a second, is we're going to start. So we're going to go look at every single row. We're going to create a for loop that looks at every single row inside of the DB that we've just created here. So we're going to go for row in DB. And what that's going to do is it's going to look at every row. Well done. And now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually check that there's content in this row, because there's a few blank rows that I've added. So first we're going to go if row does not equal empty list, continue. And now what we're going to do is, what we have here is we actually have a header line to start with, and then we get all our content below. So we need to grab this header line, find it, grab it, and keep it separate from everywhere else, so that we can reference it as options and settings, so that it's going to look option window W equals setting 1920. So if, so what we're going to do is we're going to define something as a header. So we're going to go is header equals true. It's true because we're still looking for our header. Now if is header is true, like that, so we don't need to say anything. If is header is true, then our header must equal the row. This is saying our first row. If is header is true, that means that our header equals row. Yep, it's assigning that row to our header. And then is header is going to equal false. So what it's going to do is it's going to, in our for loop, it's going to set this to false, and it's going to go, oh okay, the header's already been found, so we're going to continue looking at the rest of the content, and it's going to bypass this section here because we've already found the header, and the header is that row. So because we've found our header is false now, we're going to go into looking at everything else. So for column in range, this is our for loop looking in the range of every single row, 1, and then the length of the row. Cool. And then we're going to decide stick everything into our temporary dictionary. So dict1 equals curly brackets, and it's just going to create an empty dictionary when it runs this. And we're going to go dict1 is now going to dict1 header. So that's our header. So we're going to say the very first entry into our dict is going to be the header, and it's going to look at what's in the column, and then that's going to equal row and what's in the column, if that makes sense to you. Makes sense to me, but you'll see what it does very soon. And we're going to make a second temporary dictionary, which is, sorry, what am I doing? Which is going to be a row. It's going to look at the first entry, and it's going to format the dictionary for us, and then we're just going to empty out our first dictionary because we don't need it anymore because it's been assigned into dictionary 2, and we're going to go outside of our for loop, and we're going to now assign it into our global dictionary. So this is going to be the type. So everything within this database within our global dictionary is going to be under what we call the type, which is going to be settings, but we haven't got any yet. And that's just going to equal our dictionary. And then we're going to close the file. So we've opened it up here, just got to close it just to keep things tidy. And that is it formatting for the global dictionary. So I'm just going to zoom out a bit, sorry if you can't read it, just so I can fit it all on the screen for you. And we're going to go and we're going to call this so settings import. Now our file is called settings.csv, and we're going to name it in our dictionary settings. Sorry, it isn't settings.csv. I think I had a... It's just setting. Yay. And that should throw it straight into our global dictionary. So if I add a print command for our global dictionary and change it from Blender Render to Blender Game, which I haven't done yet, funnily enough, and hit play, and just escape it real quick, and if we toggle system console, as you can see, it has printed out our global dictionary. So, of course, I have to scroll up. Okay, so let's just look at this one. So full screen, the setting is currently 1, which means true. Our frame rate setting is currently 0. Our anisotropic filtering setting is currently 16. So that's working exactly how we want it. Yay for things working. Now, we don't want to, as you can see, I've got true level triggering on, so that's going to happen every single tick. But you're going to want to load more than one thing in your initialization script, so I'm just compensating for that. And you don't want everything to run on one tick, so you can spread it across multiple ticks. Even though this is all going to happen in one tick, for your game, I imagine you've got multiple ticks. This is making sense to you, so we're just going to quickly implement that now. So if init not in own, we're going to go own init equals 0. And then we're going to go if own init equals 0, which of course it does now. We're going to put this line in here. So we're just going to go. Ooh. Oh, I forgot what the hotkey was just to move something down. I've honestly forgotten. Oops. No harm done, I can just copy paste. Okay. Now that we have that, we're going to just quickly, just at the very bottom of our script, own init plus equals 1. So every single time this runs, init is going to go plus equals 1. So this is only going to be loaded in once in the game. And say you've got 200 things loading into your game, when own init equals 200, or in our case it's good, we'll just do something smaller for the sake of the tutorial. If own init equals 10, we're going to own dot state equals, I forgot what is set to state number 2. Embarrassing. Let's just quickly push to that and just give it a try, and we'll open up our debug properties, go play, state equals 1. Ooh, I forgot to put an if there. Okay, so 3 sets it to 1 and 2. If we just go play, 2. Okay, that's what we want. So that's switching from this state into our menu state, which is when we're going to load in our menu. And just to demonstrate this change in the menu, I'm just going to copy and paste our top section up here. Go menu, and I'm going to do our whole init thing again. Except for this time, when init equals 0, we're going to go scene.add object, and we're going to go add cube by our AA main controller. And for infinite, I spelled controller wrong. Controller and own init equals 1. So now it's going to load in our cube when we move into our menu. As you can see there, our cube is there. So that's done, but we actually haven't gotten into loading the settings yet. So let's do that now. How about that? So let's do this one by one. So we're just going to do a series of if statements saying if this in the settings equals that, we'll set that to that, and if it doesn't, we'll set it to that. Really simple. That's just all it's going to do. Not quite sure if there's a more optimal way of doing it, but it just seems simple and easy to do, and we don't want to do anything way too complicated for this. So we're just going to start off by going if. Now, let's first explore how we're formatted into the global dictionary. I'm getting ahead of myself, sorry. So we're just going to go print, and let's just print off one setting. So GD, now our type was settings, this file here. So if we go settings, it's going to print out only our settings. So let's hit play. Oh, sorry, I set the initial state to 2. Oops. Here we go. It's not adding the cube now. What have I done? Oops. I'm not getting an error in the console. Oh well, not to worry. We'll work it out later. Maybe in the next tutorial when it actually matters, the next part of this tutorial. So, I'll just drag this across. We've printed off our settings, GD settings, and as you can see, motion blur is set to 1. Window height is set to 1080, debug is set to 0. As you can see, it's not in order. Your one will probably come up in a different order than that. It doesn't really matter. But what's important is that it's there. In it. Let's go back. So now what if we just want to work out the settings for only full screen? We go full screen, because that's the next label in the hierarchy of the database. So now we've printed out only setting equals 1. Now how do we just, without that whole setting thing there, which is handy but kind of unnecessary at this point, we can just go setting, and it's going to just tell us the setting of full screen in the settings. That's simple. And we get a 1. Perfect. And if I want to get even more creative and go, gotta spell this out, Anisotropic Filtering with a capital A, Anisotropic Filter. Okay, yep. And go play. It prints this out as 16. So we're correctly reading the file from the disk, and we've got it inside our game. Now we just need to apply it. The last thing to do. So let's do it. So first, we'll do it in the order that we created it. So if BGE.render, sorry, I'll explain what we're doing first. So first we're going to check if our window width of our game matches what's in the setting. So we're going to first just check that. So if BGE.render.get window width with our parentheses does not equal what's in our settings. So in our GD we got settings, and it's going to be window width, what we called it in our text file, and it's going to be setting. We're going to go print, and just for fun's sake, we'll only do this once because it takes a while to type, but I'm just going to demonstrate that it's going to work. So what I'm going to write, window is currently space apostrophe plus string. We're just going to take this in, plus, but should be plus string. I think this is a string anyway, but I'll put it into the conversion. And now if we play the game now, we're gonna get this shot. Window is currently 493, but should be 1920. And if we do it in standalone, where we set this to 64 by 64, start and exit, we're going to get Windows currently 304, but should be 1920. I don't think it can go down to 64, I think that's why. So we're correctly identifying that this isn't working, so we need to change it. So we write to this, bge.render.set window size, I think it is. We're about to find out if it is or not. And we're going to go integer, and we're going to just chuck in this value here. And then we're going to check in the height as well. Because if one's wrong, we might as well scale it to both the height and the width. So we're just going to grab that, and put an H there. So now if we hit play in standalone, boom, we get a big screen. A very big screen. So I don't actually want it that big, so we're just going to change this to 1440 by, what's the file for that? 900A. And just go save. And now when we start the standalone player, it's gone 1440 by 900. Brilliant. That wasn't that hard at all. Okay, now we should also, sorry, I had my finger on my mouth, check the window height, because the width might be correct, but the height might not be. So we might as well check the height in the same line. And we're not getting any errors, which is perfect. So let's move on to the next one, which is full screen. So if so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be checking what it says in the file against what it is in the thing. And Blender, sorry, I'm tired. Okay, so GD settings full screen setting equals 1. So if the setting is set to 1, and bge.render.get full screen is false. So if full screen is set to true, but the screen is actually in windowed, it's going to tell it that it needs to be full screen. So it's just going to be BGE dot render dot set full screen to 1. Sorry, I really should be saying period instead of dot, but oh well. Gonna just have to deal with it. And now we just need to do it for the other way round as well. I could copy and paste, but hey, let's be unoptimal. Equals 0. Okay, let's be optimal, come on. We're going to set it to be false. So we've just done the opposite of what we've done before. If our settings tell us that it should be windowed, but it's actually in fact full screen, it's going to set to 0. So now because in our settings file we have it set to 1, it should now change us into a full screen mode. Are you ready for this? Let's just save it because I haven't been doing that. Full screen. Something went wrong. Ah, okay, cool. Sorry. Dumb mistake. Very, very dumb mistake. You see here, I have an integer there, and it should be a string because it's in the global dictionary as a string. There we go. So if we go play, sorry, in standalone, it's entered full screen for us. Brilliant. I think it should be like that. Oh, odd. Oh well. Okay, what's next? Vsync. So here we have 3 different value types that we can be having. We can have false, true, or adaptive. Okay, and we... but because the way it's referenced in when we do get anisotropic filtering as 2, 4, 8, 16, we don't have to do what we have here. We can just go anisotropic filtering equals the number that we have in there. So it's going to be simple. So, why am I saying anisotropic filtering? I'm talking about Vsync. Completely lost my train of thought. So, let's do this. But change full screen to Vsync. Oh, we have a capital V, I think. Without an E. GD settings Vsync setting does not equal BGE dot render dot get Vsync parentheses BGE dot render dot set Vsync sorry, I should change that to int because that's what that returns. Set Vsync, and we've got to do this again. There's no real way of testing that other than playing it and making sure we don't get any errors, which we don't. So we're doing well, I believe. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go print. Bruh. If it doesn't equal. But it's not printing anything because I think Vsync is already set to on and our setting for it is on. So where do we change Vsync? I don't even know. Whoa. Vsync. So we change it to off and press play. We get that. Okay. Next is in our settings, anisotropic filtering. So again, if bge.render.get anisotropic filtering parentheses does not equal integer, and we're going to go this right here. but change Vsync for Anisotropic Filtering. That's how you spell it, eh? What's it called here? Where is it? Oh, it's in the changing settings. Okay. Never mind, we won't check it because it's too far away. Yep. And we're going to go BGE.render. Oh, what am I doing? You can just copy this. But add a dot and change that to set anisotropic filtering. And we're going to set it to this. Boom. What's next? Motion blur. So if and then we have to do this in a similar way that we did the full screen. So if motion blur, how do we have it spelt in the file? Motion blur setting equals 1. Now, because motion blur is off by default in the game engine, and I think the only way to turn it on is with an actuator. I'm not sure for certain because I've never actually had to turn it on other than script. Maybe there is a way, maybe there's not. So we're just going, if it equals 1, we're going to turn it on, and there's no real other way, except for when we go to applying settings that we changed in the game when we have to turn it off, and so on and so forth. So bge.render dot enable motion blur, I think it is, and we're just going to give it a setting. So I think I use 0.3 enable motion blur, but let's go like super high up. Oh no, because nothing's actually moving on screen, so we won't notice, but it's there. And because we won't notice, we're just going to go print motion blur on. Actually no, that doesn't actually tell us much if we come and change this game. So we're going to go enabling. Enabling. How do you spell enabling? I think there's no A. Enabling. Yeah, that looks right. Okay. 3 more. If actually it's pretty much the same as that. If frame rate setting equals 1, we're going to enable it. Else we're going to turn it off. So I'm just going to go Control D for those 3 because the other 3 are pretty much identical. So for profile and for debug, and then under here we're going to go bge.render.show frame rate 1 and else, and we're just going to take this and put a 0 there. So if that doesn't equal 1, we're just going to turn it off because it might be on. Who knows what I have pushed here, which I have that on, so I can turn it off. I'm going to do this for the other 2. Except we're going to change it from frame rate to this one's profile. And this one is debug. No, but it's not called debug, it's called properties. Okay, I think that's it. Let's just push play and see if we get any bugs. Any errors in my code? There isn't any. And we have a nice enabling motion blur here. So that technically concludes our tutorial, but let's first just go through and test it and make sure it works. So let's turn all these on and let's create some properties for it to show us in in our debug property, and let's change full screen to 0. So that should come up as windowed and with motion blur on. Here we go, start standalone player. Boom, and our debug properties have shown up there. And yeah, so pretty much you can use this method for anything in your game, whether you should be adding certain objects or not. Just going, maybe having a setting, having a setting here which says cube, and if it's 0, we're not going to add the cube when we get to the menu, or if it's 1, we're going to add the cube to the menu. It's really quite open-ended, the potential of what you can do with this, but this is it shown in the context of settings and how it can be used for settings. And yeah, that concludes our tutorial. Just to do something wacky, like 800, no, we'll go 1920 by 50. Here is standalone player. Here we go, look at that. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. I'll see you for the next part. We will be creating a small GUI in the game and changing the settings in the game. So see you next time. Goodbye.